What's up, Internet? You're tuning in episode 93 of the FlipScreen Games podcast, a weekly video game podcast where two best buds from different nations come together to discuss the wide world of video games. I'm your host, Pete Messi, joined as always by my very good friend and co-host, Mr. Stephen Radford.
Hello, hello.
Hello, Steve. How you doing?
I'm really good, thanks. How are you?
But I'm doing okay. As a PlayStation fanboy, as everyone likes to call me, um, I was hurt after last week, with such a poor showing from Sony over at that their PlayStation showcase. But it appears, Steve, there may be a glimmer of hope if you're willing to take a giant grain of salt and just bite on some rumors. So how do you feel about doing that later?
I mean, yeah, I'm up for that. It's a pretty huge grain of salt, the size of a rock, I think. Like they should have had a whole week of really good press. They came off the back of a showcase, and it's just been an absolute, ridiculous week of crap where nobody was interested in the project queue. Nobody thought that it was a good showcase. We've had stories about The Last of Us multiplayer being delayed and then officially being delayed, and then the team has apparently been cut back. And yeah, I don't know. It's not been a good week for Jim Ryan and co.
Feels like it's like it's so funny. It feels very reminiscent of the conversation we were having about Xbox just a few weeks
Yeah,
ago, where it's
right.
like just L after L. What are they doing? Like, oh man. And it feels like Sony, we just a few weeks ago did that conversation on the show about who's winning the generation or not the generation, excuse me, the year, right? And I remember making the point of like all Sony has to do is continue to fly under the radar, right? Like, and never mind. They just
They honestly could have kept their mouth shut, honed in on PlayStation, and just been like, "We're going to do a showcase all about the Spider-Man 2," and that could have been it, and like
yeah,
nothing
it
else.
would have been better.
Spider-Man 2 and Final Fantasy. They could have just had those two
They should have called
back
it a
to
state of
back,
play. They should have
and
said, "Hey,
yeah,
state of play. Guess what? We have," and literally you could throw in the Metal Gear announcement too.
and I think the marathon thing, I think that can go in there
Sure.
too, or you save that for Bungie's thing later in the year, but they've kind of made that all about Destiny too, so I kind of
Yeah.
get that they don't want to annoy fans by having a different game there.
But just like those four things and be like state of play, you would have been like, what a great state of play. Tight, 20
Yeah,
minutes,
and it would have
like
been yeah, well, 20 minutes and 10 minutes of that was Spider-Man. I think
yeah.
everyone would have been like, "Wow, that was great."
You've been like, yeah, awesome. Great way to kick it off, right? Great. Instead of it feels like they just I think the easiest way to boil it down is just unforced error, right? Like
Yeah.
you created a negative narrative where there wasn't one, and it's insane. But we're gonna talk about that and all the stories around it in just a few seconds here. But I do want to kick off this week's episode with a question from the question block. This one comes from Left Eye Lazy over on the Discord, who wrote in and said, "We're less than a week from Diablo and Street Fighter. Do you think people will pause Tears of the Kingdom? And in a summer of fantasy and fighting games, is there room for anything else?"
It's tough, right? Because we've also got at the end of June, Final Fantasy, and people are absolutely gonna pause, I think, Tears of the Kingdom to play that if you're not finished Tears of the Kingdom by the end of June, you'll be a good chunk of the way, and I imagine you'll pause
Yeah.
it, come back to it.
I don't even know if I'll like assuming I haven't finished the game by then, which I don't think I will because there's so much to do and I'm having
Even
so
if
much
you've done
fun.
the story, right? If you've done like, you've gone to the castle, there's still so much to
Yeah.
find around the map.
And I could see a lot of people, because again, right, Final Fantasy 16 being a PlayStation exclusive, like that's going to be a TV game, right? Like a game you want to play on your TV, like when you're in your living room where your
Oh, yeah, I'm
PlayStation
playing that
5
on
set
my
up.
project. I'm playing that on my Project Q. What do you want about?
Maybe so. But so for me, I could see myself that being the game I'm playing in the living room, right? And then I'm still chipping away at side quests and side adventures
Mhm.
and Tears of the Kingdom on the Switch at night or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know. Diablo for me is gonna be a Steam Deck game. I'm playing it on there. I played the open beta on there, and I fell in love with it. That game is exactly what I wanted from a Diablo game. It's a kind of a return to form after Diablo 3. And I'm loving Tears of the Kingdom. We were talking off mic, and we're gonna talk about it more on Nintendo Noise about it. But Diablo's Diablo, and that's my game. That's like the game I've been playing since 1997, something like that, when I first played that game. So I'm pausing it for that. And I would imagine people who are Street Fighter fans, I don't know if there's much crossover there with Tears of the Kingdom players.
I
If
think
you're
it's
like
the same thing. Where like even if you are a fighting game player and you want to jump into Street Fighter and like get into that and mess around, right? That feels like the kind of game that like you're gonna play for a couple hours a night for forever, right? Like or until there's the next fighting game or whatever that catches your attention. Because obviously there's a lot of them coming out in the next 18 months.
oh, we've got
Um,
Tekken as well, haven't we? What's the other one coming out?
Mortal Kombat 1.
We just need Soul Calibur to come back, and then we've got the return back to the fighting game
Who else is
era
who else is
heyday.
missing? There's another one. There's one other one that I feel like needs its moment. Oh, we need something from I can't think of the name of the developer, the Blaze Blue team that made Dragon Ball Fighter Z as well.
Oh, okay, yeah, yeah.
Oh God. What is that? Is that Arc System? Can you look that up for me real quick? Because that's gonna bother me.
Sure.
Um But yeah, to answer the question, I think with Street Fighter, right? I could see that being a game that you're playing for, you know, months, however long at a time, and that when you do hit that point where you're like, all right, cool, I've been bodying people online for 2 hours, or I just got my ass handed to me and I need a break. Let me jump back into Zelda, right? Like they're complementary experiences, I think, right? It's not like Starfield is
I
coming
think
out, right? Where you're
yeah,
like, "Oh, am I gonna juggle 2 giant open world RPGs at the same time?" That feels like a lot tougher than a multiplayer game.
I think Diablo is that though, like, there's such a big single player element,
Yeah, totally.
um, and,
Diablo,
like,
I could see
the
being a tougher ask.
there's cutscenes in there, every single character class has their own story. You wanna play that over and over again, it's absolutely massive.
Steve, you know what I forgot was coming out? That's coming out on the 3rd is We Love Katamari Reroll? Come
Oh
on.
god.
Oh my
Yeah. Yeah,
god.
see, that's like a fun game. That's a game I wanna play with friends around, and we're all just like and I hand them the sticks, and I'm like, "Go on, try and control this weird ball thing, and I'm not gonna tell you how it
Oh, see,
works."
Katamari is my, like, zen game, right? Like, I put that if I'm feeling stressed, or, like,
You
anxious
just wanna
or,
feel
like
like a monster who's, like, crushing the earth? Like, that's awful.
no, it's fine. It's very relaxing. I am
You were
excited
right,
about
by the way.
Diablo, though. Like, I really do want to play it. I don't know how I'm gonna fit it in.
Don't play Final Fantasy, and
Mm,
play Diablo instead.
I don't know, Steve. Bold,
Yeah.
bold
I
suggestion.
You know, I feel like Diablo is gonna be my game of the year. From what I played of it in the beta, I
That's
got so
crazy. You're playing
hooked on
Tears of the
that
Kingdom
game.
right now.
Yeah, I'm
You
playing
picked
Tears of the Kingdom
you
right
picked
now,
the
and
wrong game of the year every year.
I do not pick the wrong game of the year. What did we pick with the year before last? We both picked Metroid.
Yeah, you're right. Okay, you got it right that year.
What did I pick last year, and what did you pick
Elden
last
Ring.
year?
Elden Ring you picked
Oh,
last year.
Elden Ring. Yeah, yeah. Okay, right.
That
So I
was
picked
wrong.
the
That was
wrong
the wrong
game.
game.
Yeah,
Everyone picked the
just
wrong game of the year.
yeah.
It was God of
Everyone was
War.
wrong, but Pete was right. Okay.
Yeah, just saying. Yeah, I'm not one to usually say that I'm right and everyone else is wrong, but in this case, when you're right, you're right. I mean, come on, God of War Ragnarok, everybody. Did you see the scene with the dog? You didn't cry? You're dead inside. All right? I don't know.
Fair enough. I wish I could pet the dog in Tears of the Kingdom. Why can't I do that?
You can feed it, but you can't pet it, and
And I can
it's
run
tragic.
around it, and it like loves me, but I can't touch it. It's really
Yeah.
annoying.
Get more that's the thing with Final Fantasy too. You have a dog sidekick in 16, and I'm very excited about
I
that.
mean, I've got light spoiler for Tears of the Kingdom, and I've sort of got a sidekick now at the moment. You know?
It's not the same thing. I want a
Well,
dog. More dogs in
okay.
video games, people. And not just a dog that you can pet or feed. Like give me a dog companion. All right.
Go
We do
play
have some
Fallout
other
4.
we do have some other good stuff coming up too, though, right? Like, I mean, in July, there's Oxenfree 2. We got Pikmin 4. Is that
Does
right?
anyone know when Pikmin 4 is coming out?
No,
Does
it's
it
a
have a
yeah. I'm
release
looking at
date?
GameSpot. It says it's coming out on the July 21st. I don't think that's right.
Maybe it did get a release date.
Seriously?
Yeah, July
It
21st.
does say that. Yeah, why
Yeah.
did we forget that?
I don't know because no one cares about that game, I think,
I
is the
do.
problem.
You're
But I
ridiculous.
don't think you will when it gets to July and you're, like, knee deep in Tears of the Kingdom and Final Fantasy still.
I
I
think I'll be I
genuinely
think
think this game's gonna get overlooked by a
I
lot
think
of
I'll be
people
done with
because of
Tears
that,
of the Kingdom by July.
but probably not Final Fantasy. That
Probably not.
comes out at
Yeah.
the end of June, and you think,
Yeah.
you're really gonna finish that in, like, 3 weeks? Probably not.
I don't know. Yeah, I guess it depends on how long it is. It's tough though, man, because like right after that, like going into August, right? Like you got um Armored Core, right? Like that I think is definitely a more niche title, but like it's probably going to be the most successful Armored Core of all time, given that From
Off the back of
Software is
Elden Ring, yeah.
yeah, right? Is like, who they are now. You got to imagine that's going to make a splash. And then Baldur's Gate 3 is out that month, and then
That game I really worry about because I do think that's gonna get overlooked, and I think Diablo is gonna be the reason. People that are interested in Baldur's Gate are also interested in Diablo,
and it's sandwiched between
and
that and Starfield, which comes out just
yeah,
like a week later.
it's a really, really bad position for them to be in.
It's a shame. I've
Um,
been looking forward to this game for years, and I
and
I
no
think you're right.
Xbox release. No
Yeah.
Xbox release either, it's not good.
Mm. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see on that one. I hope you're wrong, but I think you're right. Unfortunately. But yeah, I mean, I think this is a surprisingly stacked year. Just like when you really look at it, like there's some really big heavy hitters for the rest of the back half of this year. Couple quiet months in the earlier half, but we got some really, really good stuff to look forward to. But yeah, I think aside from fantasy and fighting games, I think they're the biggest thing is probably going to be Armored Core. You know, like Armored Core has a chance to, I think,
You think that
really
can clinch Game of the Year though? That is way
no,
more niche
no,
than
no, no.
like
It
a
can't be Game
Souls
of the
game.
Year. But to answer the question, right, is there room for anything else? I think there's room for that game. That game is different enough from the other big stuff this year that I don't think it I don't know. Could it win someone's game of the year? Sure. I don't think
I
it's
mean,
gonna capture hearts
we
and minds the way Elden Ring did, but I mean, maybe.
we
We
got
know From Software
Spider-Man,
has the juice.
I guess there's some way you could consider Spider-Man fantasy. I don't know if I do.
I
Um,
wouldn't. Wait, when I think fantasy, I think swords and sorcery. I think superheroes are more on the science fiction side of things.
yeah, me too. So there's that's coming out. And I think a lot of people are going to drop whatever they're playing as soon as that comes out. I think
That's
you're
not in the
probably
summer
one of
though.
them.
That's in the fall.
Oh yeah, that is in the fall. Yeah.
I think that's going to dominate the fall aside from Starfield, right? But again, Starfield is like a will they, won't they? Whereas I think Spider-Man 2 feels like a known quantity, right? Like it's like that
Oh,
game's
especially after the showcase. Like
yeah,
that was the highlight of the showcase.
that game's going to come out and probably be a solid 9 and I think everybody will like it just as much as they like the last one, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, but I think
It's not going to beat Tears of the Kingdom in terms of the
no.
narrative for the
No,
year. I
it
don't
won't.
think.
No, I don't think so at all. I think Tears of the Kingdom has it locked. I don't
Hmm.
think that Diablo 4 or any of these other games and no disrespect to any of those games. I think they'll all be good. I think they'll all be great. But it's Tears of the Kingdom, man. Tears of the Kingdom is a 10, right? Whereas like
Yeah.
Diablo 4 is probably going to be a 9, 9.5. Spider-Man's probably going to be a 9, 9.5, right? Maybe an 8, 8.5. Not 8, but more like 8.5, 9, whatever.
Yeah, I
But
think Diablo's probably gonna rank lower than that. It's a complex game, and there's a battle pass system in there which people aren't happy
there's also
about.
the
Like,
chance that it launches with, like, server
I
trouble and
honestly don't
stuff,
think it
and
will this time. They've been doing stress tests, they've
yeah.
been doing this in closed alpha, closed beta, open beta, like, this has gone through a lot to get to where it is.
I hope
Day
you're right,
1's
yeah.
gonna be a shit show like it always is with every Blizzard title. But, Blizzard needs this to be a hit. Overwatch 2's been a disaster. They've just canceled the PvE stuff,
Yeah.
and people aren't happy about it. It kind of feels like Overwatch 2 is pointless, and they really need a hit. They
They need
need
a win.
something. Yeah.
Alright, so let's jump into the Sony conversation here because it's, I'm gonna take you down a rabbit hole, gang. Alright, we're putting on our tinfoil hats, we're doing some conspiracy stuff. Uh, we'll see what happens, right? We'll see what happens, but we're gonna talk about what's being reported. So, according to a well-known leaker, called the Snitch, Sony allegedly has multiple game announcements that were planned for the recent PlayStation showcase that we had last week, and they were held for unknown reasons. That there are these either game announcements that are ready to be made or unannounced projects that are ready to be announced, some of which that are imminent, and that for whatever reason Sony made the decision to not reveal those things. So the example that the snitch gave, and there's I have a screenshot from their Discord, which is kind of where this story originated. And they say, guys, I know some announcements that were not announced during the showcase. It's super, super weird. For example, a PC port, which is coming in July, to which somebody replied AAA, and they said yes. So the idea that there's supposed to be a unannounced AAA PlayStation port coming in July is one of the examples of a thing that is like, this thing is ready, it's imminent. I don't know why they wouldn't announce it, right?
Let's have a
So,
quick look at the NVIDIA leak while you I'm gonna have a quick look while you're filling in the kids,
do you
and I'll
think?
find out, and I'm gonna see which game it is because I have a feeling I know what it is.
Yo, I report it. If we're right about this, we'll clip this out right now, and we're gonna prove our salience for the next time. All right, you can take our stuff to the bank here, kids. So the snitch says that they knew about these announcements in advance, right? That it's strange that they haven't been revealed, and that kind of sets the stage for some of the other reports I want to thread in here, right? So this seems to be backed up by a claim that Insider Gaming's Tom Henderson made in an article that he wrote recently over on Insider Gaming that was titled "PlayStation Needs a Second Showcase This Year." And in that article, Tom said that updates and reveals on PlayStation's new hardware, in addition to focusing solely on first party titles, would be the showcase that PlayStation needs to set up the next phase. It's understood that a lot of the games we're waiting on. Excuse me. I want to start this sentence over because this is the important part. It's understood that a lot of the games we're waiting on seeing are pretty much ready. So I'm not sure why Sony decided to wait this time around, right? So this is yet another person iterating that, as far as they're aware, most of these things are done. They're ready to be shown. They were not shown for whatever reason. So I want to pose a question to you, Steve, before I thread in a few more details here. Is it possible that some of these announcements were held so that they could be used next week at Summer Games Fest, right? Sony did have a presence last year at Jeff's event. That was where we got the first official
Barely, but yeah.
check in on the Last of Us multiplayer game, which we'll talk about later. We got that graphic. We were told we'd hear more about it, this year. Obviously, that seems
Well, I
to
mean,
no
we
longer
also
be the
got
case.
the Last of Us Part 1 reveal there, was it?
That might be
Or was it
right.
the PC port reveal? One of them was there.
Yeah,
No,
I
it
can't
was
remember
part
which.
1 reveal, and it got leaked mere moments before on PlayStation's website.
Correct. Yes, yes, you're right. That did happen. Um, so do you think that that could be part of it here? Do you think that we may see some reveals from PlayStation during Summer Game Fest?
It's possible. I don't think it's gonna be anything huge. I don't think it's gonna be hardware. I mean, maybe it's hardware. It wouldn't be the first time Jeff's shown hardware off. Remember he showed off the Series X for the first time at the Game Awards, and that's when we saw what it looked like, and we were all like, "Wow, what is this weird cuboid thing?" But I don't know. I feel like they would have saved the big announcements for their own show and gave Jeff something small like they did last year. They had the big chunky stuff at their show, the Wolverine thing or whatever, and then Jeff got the one announcement. So I could see something coming later in the
Well,
year.
real quick,
Maybe
that wasn't last year, right? The
that was the year
Wolverine, that
before,
was the
right?
year
Yeah.
before, and then last year they were at Summer Games Fest, but they didn't Game Fest,
They
excuse me.
had their own presentation though before Jeff's presentation. This wasn't branded
But it
Summer
wasn't
Games Fest
it
like
wasn't
their
a
presentation last year.
right, and their presentation last year wasn't what this was. It wasn't a PlayStation showcase,
No, it
right?
was a state of play.
Right. Just to
But
clarify, just want to make sure that, we're keeping it straight for the folks in the audience.
yeah, I don't know. It's strange. Quite possibly. I think maybe the snitch is right. Maybe the PC port gets shown at Jeff's event, and that
With
then
the
comes
idea
out
like, "Hey, it's
in
coming out
July. It's
a
coming
month from
out
now," right?
imminently. I've had a look at the Nvidia list,
What do you
and
got?
there's a few on here. I think it's Gran Turismo 7 in anticipation for the movie coming in August.
Damn it, I hate how much that makes sense because 'cause you're probably right. Because I want it to be Ghost of Tsushima.
Ghost of Tsushima's on here, Demon Souls is on here, Helldivers 2's on here, Horizon Forbidden West, Ratchet& and Clank is on here, but we only saw Helldivers 2 at the showcase this week, right?
Yeah, and they did announce that that's coming to PlayStation and PC.
And
So
PC, yeah. So that probably is not the one the snitch is talking about. But I think it's Gran Turismo 7. It feels like it's been a while since that came out on PlayStation 5. It wasn't last
been
year, it was the year
even longer
before.
since Ghost came out, though. Come on, people, let me
It
get
is,
Ghost
but
of Tsushima on my Steam Deck already.
it makes sense. They tied in the PC port with the HBO show, The Last of Us. I could see them doing the same thing with Gran Turismo 7 and the
Yeah,
movie. And maybe you, like, pre-order it, you get a free ticket because they did that with, Uncharted movie. If you pre-ordered the collection on PS5,
yeah,
you got a free cinema ticket, so they could do something like that.
it's interesting. Hmm.
That would be my guess. I'd like it to be Ratchet& and Clank or Ghost of Tsushima. Ratchet& and Clank would be great. I'd play that again on my Steam Deck.
I want another excuse to beat Ghost on a new platform and get all the achievements all over again and everything.
Yeah, because
Well,
you definitely have time to do that in July.
no, I don't. But at some point I will, and then I can play it. Let me buy it at full price so I can play it when it's on sale. Come on.
Yeah, there's so much on this list. This is, like, the best league ever. I can't I and, like, all of it's coming true. It's great.
So, Steve, you think there's a chance, right, that we see some Sony stuff, but you don't think it's gonna be anything big, right? So
No, do you? Do you think it's gonna be anything juicy?
I don't. I don't. I think if they had something juicy, you'd think that they would have brought it at their own showcase. However, I guess there's the argument to be made, hey, we have a few big things. We have Metal Gear Solid, we have a new game from Bungie, we have Spider-Man 2 footage. We'll save this other big thing for Summer Games Fest. I could see them thinking of it that way and that coming to pass and us being like, why the hell didn't you show this at your, like, because that's happened before, right? We've seen that in E3's past where it's like somebody who has their own showcase shows a thing another big one. And it's like, why did you do that? Why didn't you save that for your, whatever?
You know
Some,
one that I think would make sense, a huge one,
what's that?
would be, like, Bloodborne or Demon Souls. Because Jeff's always got that affinity with FromSoft, and, like,
Yeah,
he
that's
loves
true.
their games, and he's got that connection with them. We saw Elden Ring at his event. I
What
could
if
even
that's
see
the PC port?
which one?
Bloodborne.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I mean. I could easily see it being like Bloodborne or Demon Souls. But then I wonder, with the DLC for Elden Ring potentially coming out this year, do you wanna do 2 games that are similar and bring that
Is that
over?
DLC
I
still
don't
coming out
know.
this year, though? Like, we still
It's
haven't
been
heard about it.
announced,
It's
but
been
I don't
announced,
know.
but we haven't heard about it,
But
and
I
they
could
have a
see
new
that
game
being at
coming out.
Jeff's show. Like, I could easily see that
Yeah,
being the end to Jeff's show, and, like, we've got something really
yeah.
special for you, and, like, Elden Ring comes on the screen, and,
Yeah,
like,
you could be
that's where we
right.
get the date. I could see that being where we see that.
Last year's game of the year at the Game Awards.
Mhm.
Here's its DLC.
And, like,
Yeah.
we see how excited Jeff is, just like, because that was what his face was, right? When he did his face and the become the meme and it's like an emoji in our, Discord. Yeah. It was him watching the Elden Ring trailer.
It just looks like a little kid. Oh, it's good stuff. So, we're just to clarify, Steve, so we're in agreement. No major announcements or limited major announcements at
Yeah, I
launch,
think so.
right? So, here's the question, Steve. As Tom Henderson suggested, could PlayStation have another showcase later this year?
Yes, and I feel like they alluded to that as well with, "You will show you more about Project Q later this year," and I could see that being part of a more hardware-focused thing. But when do they do it? Because presumably they're gonna wanna get it done in time for Black Friday and, like, the holiday rush, so it feels like maybe September's the time. Do they wait till then to give the release date for Spider-Man 2? Because that feels very close. I don't think you do one in August, it's gotta be in the fall. So
Becomes an interesting question, right? Of like, why would you have one in June just to have one in August?
but people don't say that about Nintendo Directs. And we've come to expect that on, like, a quarterly cycle, and maybe that's what PlayStation's shifting to. Like, we'll show this bunch of games here, we'll move, and we'll do a bunch more games later in the year.
There's the argument to be made too that, right, they wanted to save some of those heavy hitters now so that when everybody else is doing all of their reveals and announcements, they're not getting their big stuff compared to other people's things, and then they do it after the fact a couple months later, and then they own the moment,
That
right?
space, yeah.
Because at the
Yeah,
end of
I
the
mean,
day, the PlayStation, we talked about it last week, the PlayStation 5 is on track to outpace the PS4 in all of the relevant metrics by which Sony judges it, right? Obviously not in overall sales or anything like that yet, but in adoption, things like that. The PS5 is thriving. It's being, gobbled up. It's more readily available than it's ever been. There's a, good library of games there, especially if you're a newcomer. Maybe they don't feel that pressure right now and they think that they can maneuver and wait until later in the year, right? Um, and
possibly. I don't feel like Summer Game Fest is anywhere near as big this year, though. Like, we've come right up to the wire, and we finally got the dates for it. Because when me and Max did our episode focusing on about what we're gonna see during the E3 period, we've only got 3 days worth of stuff. We've got June 8th
yeah,
with Jeff's show and Day of the Devs, and everyone should watch Day of the Devs. It's well
Day of the
worth it.
Devs is awesome.
And then you've got the Xbox showcase and then Ubisoft's thing. That's it.
Yeah.
So I could easily see that they could have stuffed some more things in here. I would imagine there's going to be some other things that aren't part of Summer Game Fest. Like, I think Capcom's got something. Square usually has something. But it's nowhere near as big as it was last year.
No. But I wouldn't be surprised, like as if you said, as if there's like a small presence there just to maintain that relationship with Jeff and everything. Sure. Uh, but now there is a rumor that there will be a PlayStation showcase later this year. And this rumor originated over on an episode of the Iron Lords podcast, where Colin Moriarty said, and he's somebody who's been known to leak PlayStation stuff in the past. He's like one of the more like notable examples in recent memory is being the first person to report the title of Assassin's Creed Mirage in the summer of 2022, right? So industry veteran, somebody who knows people at PlayStation, so it wouldn't be impossible to have had this information. Uh, so the direct quote is, "I've heard from people I know, and I think it's fairly obvious that there will be another showcase later in the year. I assume it will be more focused on some of the games that are rattling around." So again, that I think ties back to this idea that we've heard from the Snitch, we've heard from Tom Henderson, right? That there are these games that we know are in development, that we know there are things to be shown about, there are updates to be had, and we've just not heard about them yet. So the idea that they may have some stuff in the chamber, to pull out later this year, I think makes sense, right? That was our whole reaction to the showcase last time is where were the first parties, right? We know that these projects are in development. Why don't you have anything to say about them? And it could be that there's a showcase plan later this year. It could be that they want to coast through this year and save stuff for next year. It could be related to Xbox's ongoing lawsuit that they're actively involved in. It could be related to a lot of things. But I also think the real reason could be a lot more upsetting. And we'll talk about that in just a second. But before we get into that, let me remind you that the FlipScreen Games podcast is brought to you by our Patreon producers for the month of May. They are, of course, Arnold J. Rimmer, Christopher Valenz, Earth Visitor, Gabriel Hasselmeyer, a.k.a. Sobi, Snackago, Ty the Dude, and Wakahula. Thank you guys so much for your support over on patreon.com/FlipScreenGames. Y'all are the realest of the real, and we greatly appreciate your support of this and all of our sister shows. If you want to show your support just like they did, you want to write into the show and be a part of it in the question block like Left Eye Lazy did at the top of the show, you want to join the Discord and keep the conversation rolling between episodes, you want to do all of that and much more, you can head over to flipscreen.games. That's our website where you can find links to all the places we are all over the web, all the ways you can get involved, however you choose to do so. We thank you for tuning in to another episode of the FlipScreen Games podcast. Let's jump back into it, Steve.
Let's do it.
So here's the other wrinkle, right? What if some of these projects are in trouble? We got a report this week from one Jason Schreier that may point to just that for The Last of Us. I guess I I don't know what to call this project anymore, right? Is it a lot of people are still calling it Factions, right? Which is what
It's
it
not
was called in that.
factions.
It's not going to be called that, but it's also the Last of Us multiplayer game is doesn't exactly roll off the tongue, but I guess that's what it is. The Last of Us multiplayer game may be in a bit of trouble, Steve.
I don't think it's maybe at this point. So, after Jason's reporting, Naughty Dog came out and issued a statement on Twitter, after they were asked for comment by Bloomberg. They refused comment to Bloomberg, and then they just put out a public statement on their Twitter account, which says, "We know many of you have been looking forward to hearing more about our Last of Us multiplayer game. We're incredibly proud of the job our studio has done thus far. As development has continued, we've realized what is best for the game is to give it more time. Our team will continue to work on the project, as well as our other games in development, including a brand new single player experience. We look forward to sharing more soon. We're grateful to our fantastic community for your support. Thank you for your passion for our games. It continues to drive us." And I think the issue is that I can't remember who it was that said it. Maybe it was in Jason's reporting that someone had. Oh no, I think it was Jeff Grubb that he'd heard from people, and they said that it looks like a studio's first game of a service game,
So,
and it
uh,
plays like that.
there is some additional context provided. That's harsher than what Jason reported. I hadn't heard that from Jeff, but I believe it if he said it. Um, so what Jason's article says, right? And I'll give you the highlights. Of course, head over to Bloomberg, give Jason the support. We love his reporting. Shout out to Jason. Uh, the development on the game has been slowed down after a recent evaluation, right? So this report is according to four people who are familiar with the project, right? Those are Jason's sources. So he's corroborated this with four different individuals. And where they're at right now is a small group of developers are still working on the project while the overall direction of it is being reevaluated. The game hasn't been canceled, but many of its developers have been moved on to other projects. Which, of course, right in Naughty Dog's statement, they do mention that they're working on other projects. They have a new IP in development. There's a likelihood that that project is ramping up, and that could be in need of more hands, right? As this project was supposed to be done and it isn't. So that's a whole other thing. But we have we know that the game's been in development actively for 4 years, right? And for it to be at this stage like is obviously concerning. Um but I think the thing that I read that I thought was the most shocking is I guess not the word, but I guess the most troubling is as part of this recent evaluation, Sony had Bungie come in and evaluate the games as a service games in their portfolio, this game among them. And Bungie raised questions basically saying they were concerned that the Last of Us multiplayer project's ability to keep players engaged for a long period of time was in question, right? Was that they didn't see how this game would successfully retain an audience and generate revenue the way that a game of its type is supposed to, right?
Mhm.
And
Okay, and then it
that
dies, you need to keep people engaged. It's a multiplayer game, you've got to ramp up the traffic and keep them coming in. And I
that's the
found
only
Jeff's
reason they're
comment.
trying to get into these games, right?
Yeah,
That's
I
it's the only purpose of them.
I found Jeff's comment, and he said, "All I've heard about this game is that it looks a lot like a studio's first live service game, and that Naughty Dog wanted to do things its way, which maybe didn't bode well for factions." And I can absolutely believe that. Naughty Dog seems to be a quite a stubborn studio. They insisted on doing the PC port for The Last of Us. They took over The Last of Us Part One from Bend and the team that had kind of started that up because they wanted to oversee it in its entirety. And they're pretty precious about their IP, and rightly so. It's theirs. They created it, and they wanna look over it. But I think when you have a studio whose lineage is creating MMOs and creating the games as a service as we know it, Bungie, and they're coming in and saying that it's not fun and you won't keep people engaged, you won't keep people coming back to it. There's not a good loop here. you really kind of have to go back to the drawing board and reassess that. And that's a
Yeah.
fundamental change. That's not just it's still a buggy mess at the moment, and we can work through that. That's like we've got to go back and we've got to rework it.
And it's funny because I mean, this is not the first story like this we've had in recent memory, right? That was Phil Spencer's comments about Redfall. That is what happened, with the fan reaction to Rocksteady's Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, right? Where these games, I mean, right, going even further back, something like Avengers, these like big AAA studios that are known for making high quality single player games trying to move into the games as a service space, spending a ton of time and money to develop the game, and then not finding the fun, right? Not finding uh, the the space where it can all kind of coalesce and be the game it needs to be successful, right? Because I think a lot of these games are examples of things where, like, yeah, I don't is that what we want? Did we want a live service Avengers game that has like a 10-hour story, or did we want like a 20-hour Avengers game that was all about the story, right? And I think that extends to something like The Last of Us, right? Where like I'm interested in what Naughty Dog's vision is for a multiplayer game that is more story centric and maybe has seasonal content about groups and other parts of the world.
Yeah,
And
I kind of
that seems
wanted it like
interesting, but
I kind of wanted it like something like a Fallout 76, where I'm living in this world and I'm kind of surviving here, and it's a survival game, and like I'm one of the other people that you see, and maybe
but
I
it's
am
like,
part
do people want
of
that?
I
Because look at
I don't
Fallout
know.
76, right? Like what people
That
like
still has
about
like it still has a bit of a following, but yeah, it's no Destiny.
no. And like I think it speaks to a fundamentalist misunderstanding about what people like about the world. What people like about the world of Fallout is not the set dressing and it's the stories, right? And it's your ability to role play and find yourself in them. And I think with, Last of Us, it's interesting because I know that there's a dedicated vocal community that loved the Last of Us factions, the multiplayer game in The Last of Us. But that was a different time, right? The monetization model for games was different. Like free to play didn't exist. And the whole point of multiplayer games was like so that you wouldn't trade your copy in at GameStop after you finished it and move on.
Well, now they're separate things, right? Look at Ghost of Tsushima Legends, and
Right.
are people still playing that? Like, I don't really ever hear anyone talking about it these days.
I don't know, but I think the reason that didn't succeed probably has more to do with the fact that it launched as a game mode in that game and then got split off rather than just being its own thing, which is what I think will happen with the second one. And I bet you it'll be more popular, but we'll see.
I hope so.
But I
Uh,
think to your point, it speaks to this idea that just because a multiplayer game is fun doesn't mean that it can survive in the highly competitive games as a service landscape. And people liking Last of Us factions and being like, oh, like I want a multiplayer version. I want that mode in Last of Us Part 2. Like I liked that game mode. Cool. What's the monetization model on that? How does that game stick around for a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years? I don't know that it can or does. And like I'd like to be proven wrong, but we've seen so many of these games come out and fail. And even with the right backing, even if it's a fun game, even if, whatever, there's only so much room for these games, right? There can only be so many live service games that are supported by huge player bases. And if what you need to be successful is a huge player base and you're chasing that Fortnite, we want to make billions of dollars, we want to make hundreds of millions of dollars a month, that's not easy. And if your
do you think Sony
only
needs
path
that
to
though?
I think that's what they're thinking of. I don't think they're investing 60% of their development budget moving forward
I
into
just
these types of games so that they can make a modest profit, right?
well,
I don't think that's the
then
goal.
I don't think The Last of Us multiplayer game can only launch on PlayStation. Then like that's going to be a huge problem. You look at all the multiplayer games they announced at the PlayStation Showcase last week. All of them said also coming to PC. Bungie's new Marathon is coming to PC, and we knew that all of Bungie's games were going to come to multi-platform.
I
Uh,
wouldn't be surprised if it did come to PC at launch.
yeah, but it's not going to show up on Xbox like Marathon is.
It doesn't need to though. I think that's Splatoon is a console exclusive live service game that has
But
a
it's
dedicated
nowhere
audience.
near like the level of and it's a different monetization strategy. It's
Right.
we're paying for the game up front. If they're gonna do that with the Last of Us multiplayer game, fine. Then it can just be like, this is what it is a standalone thing. You've
Yeah.
bought it, and maybe you buy
I,
a DLC for it. That
maybe.
could be what it is.
Yeah.
That's but Back for Blood tried that. Don't think it really got the level of traction it needed in order to survive because people expect multiplayer games to be free to play now. And we had a whole conversation over on Nintendo Noise about the fact that Splatoon 3 was its chance to go free to play. They even have like a de facto battle pass system in there
I
that
mean,
could have been like a proper battle pass system.
you can even extend that example to like Halo, right? Where it's like that had its own problems with content. I think that's what's more important though. I think if this game was on PlayStation and PC and it had a good launch and it had a steady content stream, I think it would find an audience and I think that's what's important. I don't think that this game or any game that PlayStation produces that they can expect it to be a Fortnite level success. That's not a reasonable goal. And if that's their goal, they're setting themselves up for failure. But I do think they are expecting the level of consistency of something akin to that, right? Like when we talked about their financials and how a lot of the top earners are these free to play games that have microtransactions or season passes or what have you, that's the model that they're chasing.
Well, yeah, it was FIFA and
And
Call of Duty, and that's one of the reasons they were
right,
a big objector to the
of
Microsoft deal
course.
was they don't want to lose Call of Duty.
Right, and again, what else is on that list? Things like Fortnite, things like Rocket League, right? Like there are those other games um that exist in that space, but like that's the part of the whole problem, right? Is when there are already Call of Duty and Fortnite and Rocket League and League of Legends and on and on and on and on and on and on how how good and compelling does your game need to be and how good and like extensive does your content roadmap need to be for you to pull people away from games that they're already entrenched in, that their friends already play, that they've already invested a ton of time and money into, to permanently add your game to the rotation. And that either means that they need to stop playing a game that they already play or whatever, right? Like they need to make an adjustment to their existing habits to get locked into your game. And that's an uphill
Mhm.
battle because if I've been playing Destiny for 10 years, I'm not going to just jump over to another game, right? Like you might be able to find another game that I add to my rotation and me and my buddies play. Oh, when Destiny's, we're between expansions, maybe we're playing more Last of Us. And then, when the new thing comes out, we're not playing Last of Us as much, whatever, whatever. But if it does become a game where it's like it comes out and there's like a storyline that you play through when it comes out, and then I've got to wait like 4 months for the next one to come out, that player base is going to disappear. And then maybe it'll spike again when the new thing comes out, and then it's going to disappear. And it's like, is that what they want? Is that sustainable growth? It
But you
depends
gotta
on the,
think what's
the
the end game
monetization, I
stuff
guess.
here?
But
Because Destiny 2 had all of the expansions and the storylines and things like that, but it also had great end game. Like, you could go and do raids. It had a PvP with the Crucible. There was all of this additional stuff. There was always something to come back to. You had your daily tasks that you could do. You were always trying to get better loot, and, like, that was the loop for
right.
Destiny. What's the loop for The Last of Us? I don't know, but it definitely sounds like they couldn't find one that was fun
I think that's the
or one
thing,
that was
right? Is
engaging
like
enough.
it has to be story or it has to be that the gameplay itself is just so good that you keep playing, right? And I don't know, like, even if it's great, that's tough. That's a tough ask, right? Because there are so many live service multiplayer type games that I've jumped into and I've played and I've enjoyed for however long, and then I fall off. And the reason you fall off can be a myriad of things, right? You move on to other games, or there's just not enough there to keep you invested,
Or your
whether
friend
that's
group does. Like, I had that with Destiny 2, where my friend group was playing it and we were able to play a lot more than I was, and so they were pushing on ahead. And, like, I don't wanna say, "Can you come back and, like, help me with this thing you've already done, like, 2 weeks ago?" That's not fair on them. So, like, I kinda dropped out of it, and I was playing Destiny 2 for ages.
yeah,
But I think, an interesting point here is that Naughty Dog has said that the reporting is that they've scaled it back, right? That there are way fewer people working on the multiplayer title than there were. Um, Do you think this is like a cancellation? Do you think this is a reboot of
I
the
don't think
whole
it's a
thing?
cancellation. I think if the game was getting canceled, they would cancel it. I don't think that it means that it can't get canceled, right? Like we might get a report a few months from now, hey, we tried to change directions and it's still not working, and that's that. I don't necessarily think that's the case though. I think if I'm Sony, right, I'm imagining that, we like zoom out. PlayStation's goal is to have 60% of their development budget go towards these live service games. They want to launch a ton of these live service games that are going to, change the way that they monetize their studios, and that ideally a lot of them will launch and exist for a long time, right? So if you are looking at this game as an investment, right, where it's like, well, we want this game to run for like 5, 6, 10 years, like Destiny or something like that, then, okay, so you've invested 4 years and maybe you didn't get a good return on that investment. But it's also Naughty Dog. Like, what are they gonna do? They're not gonna, Naughty Dog is not gonna be punished for the fact that this game didn't come together when they're the golden goose in so many other ways, right? Like the next single player game they put out, unless it totally bucks a trend, is going to be a classic. It's going to be the hottest new PlayStation IP. It'll probably create a new mascot for the brand. Like they've been the crown jewel in their development arsenal for so long. The idea of them being like, let's give this studio maybe with more oversight from Bungie, or maybe, like something like with more specific goals for how it's supposed to evolve and change, and let them go away and spend another 2 years, 3 years, 4 years on it if they need to. I mean, that's not crazy, right? Games sometimes, Starfield's been in development for 10 years, right? Like games sometimes take a long time. And if it didn't come together the way they thought it was, and they're going to scale the team back and maybe not start totally from scratch, but really pare the vision back and try to be like, what about this works on a core level? And what is the vision for this? And how do we bridge the gap between what we want to achieve as Naughty Dog? What is our vision for this? And then what are the market realities of what this game needs to be successful? And maybe that is evolving, the battle pass system, maybe that is evolving the gameplay loop, whatever. But that, like, if they've done story work, if they've done character work, if they've done those things are probably good and don't need to be tossed out, right? It's like, how do you take what that vision was from them and
Yeah.
build around that foundation and make something successful? And if it takes another 4 years, but the game comes out and is successful for 5 or 6 or whatever, then cool, you got your return. Because every other Last of Us game, right, is like it comes out and it has its moment, and then that's it, right? It spikes when there's opportunities to spike. It gets re-released, whatever, but it's a single player thing and it's done. And you put a ton of time and money into that anyway. So if you can give them the chance to build the ship and fix it and make something that is gonna, have legs, that makes sense, because a really good, well executed, exclusive multiplayer game based on one of your most visible IP would be a huge win for them in terms of proving that they have the juice for these live service games and creating something that only they could create, that only their teams could make, that, builds on the strength of their already strong IP, which is their goal. That's clearly what they want to do. So I think if they cancel this game, it's an admission of a big failure from their biggest studio, and a game that I think was ostensibly probably supposed to be one of the games leading this charge towards live service and towards, the way that PlayStation does multiplayer games. And right now, it's an embarrassment, right? It's something that, like, if it doesn't come together, if it does get canceled, it looks like egg on their face. So being honest and transparent and being like, the game's not where it needs to be, it needs more time, we're paring back, we're doing this. If it comes out and it succeeds, nobody's going to care about that, right? And the longer it's in development and the longer people are like, this is never coming out, the less pressure there is on you later on to cancel it. And hopefully you've already had a couple successes that prove that you actually know what you're doing anyway.
Well, you can just quietly cancel something, you can just
Not this, though. They've talked
I
about it
think you
too much.
can. Rockstar cancelled, that spy game that they were working on,
Yeah, that's true.
and, like, no that they never ever publicly spoke about it. It was on their website for years,
PlayStation
and then it
exclusive.
just disappeared. Never happened. We weren't
Yeah.
working on that. What are you on about? Agent? No, never heard of it.
I don't know though. I don't think they would do that. Neil Druckmann came out and was like, "We'll talk about it next year," and they're like,
What
"I don't
was
know,
crazy though was like
crazy."
last year it looked like they had nothing. It was like we got some concept art. It was like we were in pre-production, and yet the discussion was they've been working on this alongside the single player, and so presumably there had been like a good couple of years development until last year. Like I don't know, it just feels
Well,
strange
according to
to
Jason's report, it's been in development for 4 years. So that would mean it was in development. Because I think what happened was it was in active development alongside Last of Us Part 2. And then they said that the ambition of it grew. And that was when
Mhm.
it got split off into its own thing. But when it got split off into its own thing, the team that was working on it got reabsorbed into the main Last of Us team to finish Part 2. And then that team went. And so that's like very murky. It's like how much of the work when it was supposed to just be a mode was still applicable to the full game, and you know what I mean? Like, uh, you're probably right that it has been a long time, but I think I don't think he said they were in pre-pro. I think he said that they were in the weeds of development was how I remember him talking about it, and that it was like, "Here we have this concept art, we'll have more to share with you next summer or next year,"
And I
right?
guess they don't have more to share. It's weird that they could have come out ahead of the curve to talk about it,
Yeah.
but they waited for Jason's reporting to go out, and then rather than issuing a statement to Bloomberg, come out with a public statement. It's very strange, very strange. And it's it feels like they've had a couple of misses now. The PC port's still in a bad mess. We've got the multiplayer in an absolute state, but then you went from a real high of the best video game adaptation of all time over on HBO, co-created by Neil Druckmann. It's got Naughty Dog's name all over it. Feels like The Last of Us.
And Last of Us
There's
Part 2 is not that long ago. That game was only 3 years ago, and that was a huge success, I think, depending on who
yeah.
you ask, but, I mean, I gotta be honest, I don't take a lot of the criticism of that game seriously. That's how I feel
Oh,
about
yeah,
it,
I like
right?
I
So
like The Last of Us Part 2. I just think it was a bit long in the tooth. It
sure.
could have been shorter. It felt like a Quentin Tarantino movie after his, editor passed away.
Sorry, hold on, I'm muting my phone, I was getting contacted. Okay. Sorry about that, everybody. It wasn't your phone. Usually I don't have that on. Yeah, I think that's fair, right? Like, that game probably it could have been, like, 10 hours shorter, but hey, you know. I think it's one of those things too, though, right? Like, and I guess it is kind of comparable to Quentin Tarantino in that way, right? Where when you're this auteur studio, they let you go
You just do what
long.
you want.
They're
Yeah,
like,
do
"You
what you
guys
want.
made The Last of Us, whatever, fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, have another 10 hours, whatever."
Yeah, it's like, well, we'll all be showing up because Quentin Tarantino's name's on it. So if it says Naughty Dog, we're gonna pick the game up. So it's no
Sony's
problem.
just like, "Oh, we need another yeah, how many more $1,000,000 do you need to do more mocap? And we had 10 more hours of this game? Feels pretty done, guys. You should okay, all right." Although you gotta imagine now, they're laughing all the way to the bank because they're like, "Hey, we're gonna stretch 3, 4 seasons out of this HBO show because of how long Last of Us Part 2 is. So you guys, thank you
Yeah.
very much."
Plus we didn't get DLC for that, right? Because like Left Behind weaved in and out. It we had the
Yeah.
kind of before, but also when um Joel was sick, and so like we kind of got the behind the scenes there.
It kills me that there's not a director's cut mode in part 1 where you can play with that just in the game. Like, that should be a thing.
Oh yeah, I'm surprised that wasn't in the Part One remake. Like that's how it should
That
have
would
been.
just be so cool, just as an
Yeah,
option, right? Like, I think that would be so neat. I
yeah,
guess
I love that. I
gameplay-wise,
love it.
they're kind of very different, but, like, whatever. It'd be so neat. So, yeah, I don't know, man. It's an interesting one. I guess just to put a pin on this, what do you think? Do you think we get a showcase later this year if you had to place a bet?
Yes, I don't know that they call it a showcase, but yes, I think we get something
Another
chunky. Although I
presentation?
think they probably will call it a showcase.
I I'm in a weird spot with it because I feel like where there's smoke, there's fire, right? Like this many people being like, yeah, super weird that there's all this stuff and whatever, and like why did none of this get announced? It feels like they have something else to say. And like, here's my really crazy tinfoil hat theory: maybe they bring back PSX.
Oh, I see. Oh, right, okay. PSX as in the conference, not as in the weird Japanese only console, the PSX, which is what
No, no,
my
not
brain
that one.
went to me.
No,
I was like, "What the fuck?"
the PlayStation experience, the events that they used to do. They haven't done one since I want to say like 2018, maybe 17. It's
Yeah,
been a
the
while.
last one, they had, some of the actors out on stage for The Last of Us Part 2. They showed like, they did, like, a bit of an interview with them. They didn't really show much else there. It was weird. It
Yeah.
was just focused on The Last of Us.
And that's the thing prior, right? Like that the PlayStation experience, they did always have a presentation where it was like, you know, here's stuff from the first party, here's big announcements, here's the kind of stuff you'd expect at an E3. So the idea of them doing something like that, and maybe it's not PlayStation experience, maybe it's not a live in event where they also have that, but maybe it is like they're trying to reclaim, hey, we do two presentations a year, we do one in the summer, we do one in the fall and the winter, whatever. That could be the case. And with this much, I want to believe that that's the case, but I don't know. Part of me is just like, are we just kidding ourselves? Are we just getting ourselves excited for this because we're so disappointed with what came already?
Yeah.
That's kind of how it feels to me,
Well,
you
I
know?
mean, the rumor that this was meant to be the showcase that we saw last year kind of leans into it as well, because I feel like if that's the case, and this was meant to be last fall's showcase, well, have
Yeah,
they got a showcase already being lined up for this fall as well, and they're going to show stuff there? And then maybe the kind of AAA PC port announcement is at Jeff's show, or maybe they just show more at Jeff's show. Maybe Project Q's at Jeff's show, like when they were like, "And we're
talk
gonna
more about
show
it.
you more about it later." Maybe they literally meant in a couple of weeks at Jeff's show.
That wouldn't be crazy either, because like you said, he has revealed hardware before, and the idea of them being like, we want to talk about hardware at
Do
a
you remember
at
the
its own
weird
thing,
video
and
he did at the first Summer Game Fest? And it was him just playing with the DualSense, and,
oh
like,
yeah,
that was the whole video. It
yeah,
was really weird,
could be.
but I could easily see them shipping him a Project Q and being like, "Here, get you 3 to 4 hours of gameplay out of this."
Mm. Hmm. I don't know, man. It's an interesting one. It feels like there has to be an answer here, right? I think the idea of them like putting that showcase out with no follow up feels like a strange choice, and it felt like a strange choice last week. So I would like to think that there is some, follow up, some 4D chess going on, as it were. But I don't know. It could just be a disappointing year where they made some bad decisions. That's certainly not uncommon from any
Yeah.
of them, let alone Sony, right? Like they're happy to step on rakes as often as they can. So I would not be surprised if it's just this is just what we got this year, and they're
Mhm.
confident that Spider-Man 2 will be good enough to tide people over. And
Honestly, it might just shut people up, and I think it could.
I mean, it looks great. Right? Like that's I think unfortunately, as you said, this should have been a week of good press for them. And I think the fact that that showcase had such a negative reaction and that there has been all this bad news has really overshadowed how good that game looks and how much I think that game is going to come out and excite people. So, hopefully it's as simple as that.
Mhm. Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. All right, gang. Well, you make sure that you let us know what you think. Where do you think these announcements are going to land? Are we going to see some stuff from Sony next week at Summer Games Fest? If not, what is the stuff you're excited to see at Summer Games Fest 2023? And if they're not going to be there, could they have their own showcase later this year? If so, when? When does it fit in? Where are we going to see it? When are we going to see this stuff? Could my insane theory of PlayStation experience coming back pan out? Who's to say? But I think no matter what, we're going to find out together here on the FlipScreen Games podcast. So make sure you keep tuning in. Make sure you keep writing in. Make sure you keep being a part of the community and the show. However you choose to do so, you can find a link to do it over at flipscreen.games. That's our website where you can come and write into the show. You can go become a Patreon supporter and get the show early, all kinds of other perks and goodies. However you choose to get involved or show your support, we thank you very much for tuning in to this PlayStation-centric episode of the FlipScreen Games podcast. For the crew, I've been Pete. He's been Steve. We'll see you next week.